very exciting news. There's a new alliance that's been formed in Africa, the alliance of the Sahel states. Yes, it's real. It's happening. And it's materializing right before us. This is an alliance between Mali, between Niger, and Burkina Faso. Now, you guys recall I did extensive coverage on what happened in Niger. And I speak French, so it's very helpful to follow the news out of Niger and France about that as it's happening. And there was a whole scandal with the French refusing to leave and the ambassador hiding in the embassy, and then they were blocking croissants from entering. Really just a scandal. The French made fools out of themselves. And Niger has always been an important colony to exploit for them because it has uranium. So you have these French, these mega corporations that were stealing uranium for decades. And, 1/3 of France's electricity was powered by Niger from uranium from Niger. 1/3 of France's electricity was powered by uranium from Niger, and Niger didn't have a functioning electricity grid. Just to give you an idea of the inequality and the neo-colonial theft. It's theft. It's theft by another name. So now they've taken back control of their resources. Now they've told the Americans get out, they've told the Germans get out, and they told the French get out. And when they tell the French army to get out, that's one thing. But when they start cutting off uranium exports, now that's everything. When they start cutting off uranium exports, that's how you know they're serious. Not that I ever doubted them, but I'm really pleased, and it makes me really happy to see this, because this is liberation. This is independence. We talk about Palestine and liberating Palestine. We should be proud of Niger. We should be proud of the AES, of this new alliance, of Burkina Faso, of Mali, because they liberated themselves of the French, and they did it in such a smart way. And it's such a rejection of France-Afrique, which is this, neo-colonialism that France tried to sell to African countries after World War II, keeping control of their money, of their resources, but pretending that they're independent. And to this day, that you got a dozen African countries using a French currency. Can you imagine? So let's take a look at this alliance. I'm going to play you I'm going to interpret and translate some things for you from this masterful speech that was given by Captain Ibrahim, the president of Burkina Faso. And it's really unbelievable. Really, really unbelievable.
Le monde se résume en un triangle pour eux. Vous verrez le triangle dans la plupart de leurs insignes.
Okay, so he's saying that the world in the West is seen as a triangle. What does he mean by that?
Peut-être que vous ne comprenez pas, mais le monde se résume en un triangle. Pour eux, au sommet du triangle se trouve l'empire du bien. Et l'empire
at the top of the triangle is the empire of good. Okay?
Du bien, c'est eux.
Which is the West, right? They're the good ones.
C'est la prospérité, c'est tout ce qui est positif, c'est eux qui ont droit à tout ce qui est bonheur sur ce monde, c'est eux qui ont droit à toutes les richesses, c'est à eux d'imposer leur manière de voir le monde, c'est à eux d'imposer leur vision, leur mode de vie. Voilà pourquoi pendant la colonisation.
So the West thinks that it's at the top of the triangle. It deserves all nice and good things. Prosperity, happiness. It has the right to take other people's resources, to conquer their lands, to impose its own lifestyle and its worldview on everybody else.
Colonisation ou leur conquête, je dirais, ils venaient vers nos terres et ils disaient qu'ils ont découvert nos terres parce que pour eux, nous sommes des sauvages, nous n'avons rien de comme eux en fait. Donc,
yeah, and they would pretend that they discovered our lands and that we were savages because they thought that, we don't exist and we don't have anything.
Ils nous appelaient des indigènes et c'est eux le peuple.
Right, and they called us indigenous but they were, people, right?
Ils s'arrogent tous les droits. Et pour eux, le monde doit marcher comme ce qu'ils veulent.
Right. The West gives itself, all the rights and privileges. It accords these rights and privileges to itself, and the whole world has to, do what it's told and work as they see fit.
C'est simple. Je prendrai quelques exemples. Regardez à travers leurs films. Ils ont préparé l'esprit de leur peuple pour les faire comprendre qu'ils sont les meilleurs.
He says, look at their movies, right? Just to give an example, look at how they program their populations and their people to believe that they are the good ones, right? That they are the good guys, right?
C'est eux qui doivent tout posséder. Vous ne direz pas le contraire. Dans tous leurs films qu'ils propagent, vous trouverez toujours les méchants. Ce sont soit les Russes, soit les Sud-Américains, soit les Noirs qui jouent les mauvais rôles de trafiquants de drogue, de proxénètes, de trafic d'humains, jusqu'à un passé récent, bien sûr. Vous trouverez les Arabes qui jouent le rôle des terroristes.
Right, and there's always the same bad guys, the Latin Americans. You've got the blacks who are playing, they play drug dealers and represent, human traffickers, and you've got the Russians and the Arabs who are terrorists. Always the same stereotypical stuff.
Voilà un peu comment ils perçoivent le monde.
That is how they perceive the world, and that is how they want their own people to perceive the world. I feel like this guy stole the speech of mine. I'm kidding, but really, it's perfect. Really, really.
Quand je prends sur le volet économique, qui parmi nous n'a pas traité les produits chinois de produits Shintok, comme on aimait l'appeler, de mauvais produits?
He says, if I, look at the economic aspects of things, who amongst us has not called Chinese products, made in China and described Chinese products as bad quality?
Mais aujourd'hui, j'ai pu vous dire qu'on a tout tort.
But today, I can tell you that we were all wrong.
Parce que la Chine est à un niveau de technologie assez avancé. Et c'est en Chine que la plupart de ces pays viennent s'approvisionner, mettre leur marque dessus et nous revendent comme étant leur propriété.
Because today, it's China that's innovating. It's China that is number one in technology. And all these companies go to China, put their feet down and build factories, make their products, and then claim that those products are theirs. But it's actually China's industry that produced it.
Regardez autour de vous. Nos entrepreneurs qui sont dans le BTP ne diront pas le contraire. Tous leurs engins aujourd'hui sont chinois. Ceux qui font le transport ne diront pas le contraire. Ils nous ont menti parce que nous avons fait le tour du monde un peu dans ces 20 mois pour chercher des entreprises, pour chercher des usines. Et nous avons compris que tout revenait là-bas. Mais par leur communication, ils nous ont amenés à détester tous les produits chinois, à vouloir nous faire comprendre que ce qui est bon venait de chez eux, pas forcément d'ailleurs. C'est simple.
Right, and he said that, in the last months, we've scoured the planet looking for a business, so economic and business plans to help the country. And what we realized in the end is that the Chinese produce everything. Everything comes from China. They're the best at they're actually the ones that are at the helm of all these products that the West claim to be manufacturing.
Remonter le temps. Pour mieux comprendre ce que je dirais, il faut remonter un peu le temps. Et j'espère que certains iront lire qui sont les tsars. les conquêtes mongoles, les empires perses, turcs et ottomans. Lisez leur histoire, vous comprendrez pourquoi le monde est ainsi fait. À la base du triangle, il y a deux empires. D'un côté, l'empire du mal selon eux et l'empire des esclaves de l'autre côté.
To understand the next bit, you have to go back a little further in time. Go read about the Persian Empire, Persian empires, the Ottomans, and basically history that isn't taught in the West. And you'll understand a little bit about how the West sees them. So the other two parts of this triangle, in the bottom, you've got the slaves, people who are subservient and subordinate, and then you have people who are evil.
Voilà comment ils voient le monde.
That is how the West sees the world.
Qui est-ce qu'ils appellent l'empire du mal? Ceux dont je viens de citer tout de suite l'origine, et je vous ai dit de remonter le temps. Allez-y lire, vous comprendrez pourquoi ils sont l'empire du mal à leurs yeux.
All the people that are, all these empires are just listed. For them, these people are evil. Just go read about them and you'll understand why the West hates them. Right?
Ils combattent l'empire du mal.
Sorry, skip there for a second.
Vous comprendrez pourquoi ils sont l'empire du mal à leurs yeux.
Right? He means the empire of evil in the West's opinion, not his.
Ils combattent l'empire du mal. Pour eux, l'empire du mal doit disparaître. Pour eux, l'empire du mal incarne le diable. Ils communiquent et ils le font comprendre à leur peuple ainsi. Voilà pourquoi après la Seconde Guerre mondiale, dans les années 80, je prendrai le cas de la Russie où tous les stratagèmes ont été mis en œuvre pour l'effondrer.
And so he says, look at the strategy and the tactics and the operations put in place after World War II to try and crush the Russians.
Avec le président Gorbatchev. Aux États-Unis, c'est le président Ronald Reagan qui était à la manœuvre. Trois stratagèmes principaux ont retenu notre attention. Ils sont allés donc au niveau de l'Arabie Saoudite.
So he says, you look at Ronald Reagan, for example, but there are three kinds of strategies that the Americans used that deserve our attention. So the first one, they went to Saudi Arabia.
Les demander de baisser le prix du pétrole.
And asked them to lower the price of petrol.
De $35 à $7.
From $35 to $7.
Pour faire écrouler.
Wait.
Baisser le prix du pétrole. De $35 à $7.
Yeah.
Pour faire écrouler l'économie russe.
In order to crush and crumble the Russian economy.
Parallèlement à cela, le deuxième stratagème, n'oubliez pas quelque chose. Ces mêmes personnes qui viennent de quitter l'Afghanistan, soit disant qu'ils combattaient les talibans ont été reçus par le président Ronald Reagan à la Maison Blanche.
The second strategy. Remember, the same people that just pulled out of Afghanistan, he means the Americans, hosted the Taliban at the White House.
Ils ont été armés par la CIA.
They were armed by the CIA.
Les fameux missiles Stinger, Sol-Air, ont été livrés aux talibans pour combattre les Russes.
The famous surface-to-air missiles, the Stingers, were delivered and given to them to fight Russians with.
Et plus tard, ils viennent supposer les combattre. Allez-y comprendre.
And then they pretend to go fight them.
Le troisième stratagème, c'était un bluff. Le projet IDS, Star Wars. Lisez, vous comprendrez pourquoi ils ont amené le président Gorbatchev à créer le projet Paulus qui a enfoncé la Russie.
And then the third project or strategy was the idea of Star Wars, right? So arming or putting arms in space, and they tricked. He says it was a trick. It was a bluff, essentially, to get Gorbachev to start Project Paulus and then waste money. And
Une fois que la Russie s'est effondrée, ceux qui se prétendent être de l'empire du bien ont commencé à jubiler, jusqu'à ce que vienne cette équipe avec Vladimir Poutine pour essayer de remonter la Russie en surface.
Right, and then he says after the fall of the Soviet Empire or the Soviet Union, you know, Russia was trying to find its path until Vladimir Putin came along and really, you know, set it straight.
L'empire du mal, selon eux, a beaucoup souffert. Regardez l'Iran aujourd'hui, toutes les sanctions possibles. Regardez comment ils qualifient certains peuples. Par la communication, ils peuvent arriver à vous amener à faire détester un peuple ou à aimer un peuple.
So he says, this evil empire, he means the axis of evil, what Bush calls the axis of evil, has suffered a lot because of them. Look at all the sanctions that they've imposed on Iran. Through media, through the mainstream media, through the right, you know, PR and with the right language, they can make you hate an entire people or love an entire people.
Ils sont très forts dans la communication et ils passent par tous les canaux possibles. Regardez.
They're very good. You know, the media are very good at what they do, and you know, they're on every channel. Yeah, okay, but come on, man, give us some credit. I'm better. It's their downfall. It's their downfall soon.
Regardez les guerres qui sévissent. Ils ont tout inventé pour leur propre intérêt. Et enfin, l'empire des esclaves, selon eux, c'est l'Afrique et certains peuples d'Amérique du Sud.
Right, and the third part of the triangle is the empire of slaves or the slaves, and according to them, that's Africa.
Dans leur tête, comme je le disais dernièrement, l'Afrique les appartient, nos terres les appartiennent, les richesses de l'Afrique sont pour eux, et ils ne peuvent pas concevoir que des Africains puissent s'émanciper, sortir la tête de l'eau et vouloir donc les tenir tête.
Right. So in the minds of Western leaders, Africa belongs to them. The land in Africa belongs to them. The resources belong to them, and they you know, it's inconceivable to them that Africans have Africa to themselves, and that they would, you know, emancipate and free themselves and liberate themselves. This is inconceivable.
Et pour cela, ils se sont mis un cliché en tête. L'Africain est facile à manipuler, il n'est qu'émotion. Ils trouveront toujours un Africain pour lutter contre son frère. Et ça a toujours été comme ça.
And so they came up with this idea that, he's talking about the West, he's saying they came up with this idea that, well, Africans are emotional, they're easy to manipulate, let's just find someone who can betray his brother or his own people, and, you know, use him as an in. I mean, yeah, this is what they've done with, you know, Saudi Arabia and other Arab countries, with the leadership in any case.
Par la communication, ils vous ont amené à détester votre propre couleur de peau. Dans nos cultures et dans beaucoup de cultures au Burkina Faso ici, le deuil était symbolisé par la couleur bleue. Lorsqu'une femme perd son mari, elle portait donc des tenues de couleur bleue pour faire son deuil pendant un temps donné. Ce sont eux qui sont venus vous dire que le noir symbolise le deuil, le diable, la médiocrité, tout ce qui est mauvais. Et malheureusement, nous avons tellement avalé ça que lorsque nous sommes en deuil, nous nous mettons également en noir.
So he's saying in Burkina Faso, traditionally, if a woman, you know, her husband dies, she wears blue to mourn and to grieve. But you know, through brainwashing and manipulation, they convinced Africans to hate their own skin color, and to the point that they taught people to stop wearing blue, to start wearing black. when they're in mourning, because black is supposed to represent death and bad things and destruction and so on, right? So that's the point he's making. And he says, look at us now. We're still wearing black when we mourn.
Il faut que nous nous réveillons.
We have to wake up.
Il faut que nous nous réveillons parce que voilà le cliché qu'ils ont en tête. Eux, ils sont l'empire du bien, d'autres sont l'empire du mal, et nous sommes l'empire des esclaves. Voilà comment les impérialistes voient le monde. Il faut que vous compreniez cela.
He's saying we have to wake up. Imperialists see the world, like this. They are the empire of good. There is the axis of evil, and we are the slaves. This is how they see the world, and you have to understand this.
Là, je m'en vais faire un coup de gueule à l'endroit donc de certains intellectuels qui continuent de vouloir prêcher pour les impérialistes. Est-ce qu'ils ignorent cette partie de l'histoire? Je n'invente rien. Ça a été déclassifié. Vous trouverez tout ce que j'ai dit dans les bibliothèques ou partout sur les moteurs de recherche. Ces intellectuels n'ont-ils pas lu cela? Ne connaissent-ils pas l'histoire de ce monde?
He's saying all these academics and intellectuals in the West who keep trying to, justify imperialism, do they not know their own history? Have they not read any books? Everything I just said is declassified. You can find it in any library. Do they not know the history of the world?
Peut-être par malhonnêteté ou quelques billets de dollars qui les amènent à toujours prêcher pour les impérialistes. Il faut que
He said, hold on.
C'est peut-être par malhonnêteté ou quelques billets de dollars qui les amènent à.
Maybe it's through dishonesty or a few dollar bills that they always seem to arrive at the same conclusion, and they always seem to preach in favor of imperialism.
Toujours prêcher pour les impérialistes. Il faut que nos intellectuels arrivent à tout moment à prêcher pour conscientiser nos peuples, nos masses populaires, pour qu'ils comprennent d'où ils viennent et comment ils sont vus des impérialistes.
Right, he said we have to, have a mass awakening and have our intellectuals teach our people where they came from and how they are viewed, who they are, and how they are viewed by the imperialists. I love him. He is the youngest head of state in the world, 36.
Prenons l'histoire de quelques guerres. Vous avez suivi la guerre d'Irak. Un gros mensonge qui a été inventé, soi-disant de possession d'armes de destruction massive.
He said, let's look at a couple of examples, like the war in Iraq, built on lies about weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist.
Certains sénateurs au niveau des États-Unis ont tout fait pour avoir les preuves. Ils ne l'ont pas eu. Souvenez-vous que plusieurs personnes ont démissionné de la CIA après cette guerre. Des preuves ont été inventées de toutes parts. Des services secrets occidentaux.
So he's saying there are senators in the United States who tried everything, to get proof of these so-called weapons of mass destruction, and they never found any. There are, people in the CIA who even resigned afterwards, after the war, because of it.
Souvenez-vous que Puni ont tout mensonge qui a été inventé, soi-disant de possession d'armes de destruction, ont tout fait pour avoir les preuves. Ils ne l'ont pas eu. Souvenez-vous que plusieurs personnes ont démissionné de la CIA après cette guerre. Des preuves ont été inventées de toutes parts.
They manufactured and fabricated so-called evidence, everywhere and in every way imaginable. It's true. And I recall it was Dick Cheney who was basically going to the CIA and telling them, you need to find something for me. Even if Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, go to hell. You have them too. Can we invade you? But honestly, that's another topic. I'm going to keep interpreting, okay?
Services secrets occidentaux les ont aidés à fabriquer des preuves. Et on se
all the intelligence and security services in the West helped the Americans to fabricate and manufacture evidence.
Souviens que le même Niger a été accusé en son temps en montant une fausse convention, un faux contrat.
I know what he's going to say. He's saying, remember, even Niger was implicated in this, fabrication of evidence, because I know what he's going to say now, that Saddam Hussein was going to Niger and buying yellow cake. Remember what I was telling you? Uranium comes from, a lot of uranium comes from Niger. 1/4 of the uranium imported by Europe comes from Niger. Okay, I remember this with yellow cake. Right?
De vente d'uranium à l'Irak. C'est le même processus qu'ils ont voulu amener la dernière fois pour soi-disant que le Niger vend de l'uranium clandestinement à l'Iran. C'est du déjà vu. Ils ont prétexté cela, ils n'ont pas...
And they tried to do the same thing last time by, again, by saying that Niger is selling uranium to Iran.
Pas eu de preuves. Même les Nations Unies ont trouvé finalement qu'il n'y avait pas de preuves tangibles.
They had no proof. Even the UN found that there was no, there wasn't a shred of evidence.
De présence d'armes de destruction massive. Mais ils avaient leur objectif, il fallait détruire l'Irak.
Right, so he's talking about Iraq, right? He's going back to Iraq now. He's saying even the UN found no evidence of weapons of mass destruction, but they had their objective. They'd set their minds on Iraq. They were hell-bent on destroying it.
Ils ont détruit l'Irak. Ils ont créé l'État islamique, tout comme ils ont créé les talibans dans les années 80.
They destroyed Iraq. They created ISIS, just like they created the Taliban in the 1980s. Yep.
Les armées, les équiper, et après, ils prétendent venir les combattre.
They arm them, train them, equip them, and then pretend that they're, coming to fight them. Yeah.
Comprenez le jeu. Ça n'a que trop duré. Il faut qu'on se réveille et qu'on comprenne tout ça et que nous prenions conscience de notre situation et nous battre pour notre avenir.
Yeah, it says, wake up, understand the game. We have to take control of the situation and our future.
Toutes ces guerres ont été inventées, passant par l'Irak, la Syrie, la Libye, dans le but de déstabiliser le monde à leur profit, parce que nul ne doit pouvoir les égaler. C'est ce que nous vivons aujourd'hui dans le Sahel aussi à travers le terrorisme qu'ils nous ont imposé. Parce qu'ils trouveront toujours des Noirs qui vont s'exciter et qui vont prendre les armes contre leurs frères noirs. C'est ce que nous vivons. Et ils n'ont jamais quitté ce modèle. Malheureusement, beaucoup de gens leur donnent raison. À cause de quelques billets de dollars, ils se vendent très moins cher à l'ennemi, à l'impérialiste, et ils se mettent à combattre leurs frères. Je voulais faire ce petit historique du monde.
Right, so he's saying, and they're still using the same tactic of, turning Africans against Africans, or, brother against brother, and providing the weapons for these conflicts to happen. So we have to be aware of that and be vigilant.
Pour que vous compreniez comment l'impérialisme voit notre monde. Ça se résume en ces petits triangles.
And he said, I just wanted to give you this, brief history of the world, because it does encapsulate how imperialists view the world. Yeah, absolutely right. So, like I said, everything is changing. Everything is changing. I mean, to hear a president speak like this, love it. I love it. And you can see the determination of these guys. They're focused on doing what is good for the country, and they're going to call them juntas. In the Western media. I mean, come on, that's ridiculous. They basically want to have puppets they can control, and if you're controlled by the West, they will overlook all of the nasty things nasty characteristics. I mean, just look at Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the UAE. Do you ever hear them being criticized in the Western mainstream media? Never, because human rights issues apparently don't exist there, because they play ball. The governments have been captured, and they do what Israel and America tell them to do. And the same thing is true of ECOWAS, right? So Niger and Burkina Faso and Mali, they only became problems once they tried to take back control of their countries, and especially telling the French to get out and the uranium. And it's funny because they refused to recognize the government. In the end, they had to do what they said and leave. Look, man, if the people don't want these guys in government, they would never make it. You understand? So, in any case, at the end of the day, it's a question of priorities. Do you want to be independent, or do you want to be a so-called democracy in the eyes of the West, and beg for the approval of someone who lives in Paris? Who the hell cares what someone in Paris or London or New York thinks about your country? They tell them to go to hell. What interest is it of theirs what your country looks like? They just want your resources, and these guys get it. They understand. So they've turned their backs on ECOWAS because, I mean, what a joke. They basically, when Niger had their coup, and France was trying to find an in to put the the ousted president back in power, they tried to use ECOWAS, which is headed by Niger, to threaten Niger. They said, we'll invade you, and then they backed down. And what's happening is, again, I did so many videos on Niger. It was really fun covering it. I mean, it's so funny, like the French saying we refuse to leave as if it's their country. They still got that colonial mentality. These are the bases that the French have, okay, or had, I should say, and they left. They're gone. Au revoir, au revoir. Enfin, à jamais, plutôt. And these are the American bases, and they're leaving. They're leaving along with the Germans. So what happened is that Niger are very, very smart. Look what they did. Instead of saying get out of the country, they just waited until the agreement expired and then didn't renew it. So it's such a a brilliant taste of their own medicine. It's something the Americans would do. Anyway, their country, they don't want Americans to, that they're free to decide that. What I think happened is the reason America didn't say anything, the United States didn't object to France being kicked out, which is weird, right? Because they're allies and they're supposedly there to do the same mission, there to fight the jihadists, which they created. They didn't say anything. No diplomatic or political protest, nothing. And that was after Victoria Nuland immediately visited, right? So she went there in person, and even though no planes were allowed to fly in. So she was determined, and she wouldn't. So she went to meet them, and they wouldn't even let her see the president, the ousted president, or the new leader, which is like basically their way of saying, we don't think you're important, and we're not intimidated by you like everybody else. So just say what you want to say and go. I think again, I'm speculating. I'm purely speculating, but I think they came to an agreement, perhaps implicitly, that the United States will not say anything, and they won't object if Niger want to kick the French out, as long as they can stay, as long as the United States can still have a presence in the country. Because remember, they have an enormous drone base in Niger. It's the biggest American drone base in the world, which most Americans do not even know exists because their media wants to make sure that they're ignorant. Anyway, they spend over $100 million on this base, and they want to control it. So what I think happened is they agreed to move the Americans to Agadez, which is what happened. They limited the number of troops, but the deal expired, and now they have to go. And the Germans are also leaving with them because I love the way the media framed this. Germany said it would end operations at its airbase in Niger by August 31st, following the breakdown of talks with military leaders. Okay. A similar shift taking place in neighboring countries, Mali and Burkina Faso, which are also ruled by military leaders and faced with violence from jihadist groups. Now, look, what I think they're going to do, and I hope I'm wrong, but I think they're going to turn up the heat on these countries and give more weapons and assistance to these jihadist groups just to make life hell for these governments because they kicked the Germans and Americans and French out. Kind of just to spite them, you know what I mean? We saw that in Syria, because they couldn't control Syria. They said, okay, we'll just, fund 50 million different groups to overthrow you and make life hell for you. That's such a Western Israeli thing to do. But yeah, anyway, the point is, economically, look at this. This is from last month, June 21st. Niger revoked the licenses for this French company to mine uranium in Niger. Okay, so it's called Orano, right? talked about this with you before, and basically, Niger is the world's 7th largest supplier of uranium used for the production of weapons and nuclear power. Now, in 2022, the country supplied over a quarter of the uranium used in the EU, making it the 2nd biggest uranium source for the EU after Kazakhstan. Now, before the coup, Niger was the West's major economic and security partner in the Sahel, the vast region south of the Sahara Desert. But the military junta, you see this term that keeps coming up, junta, it's a derogatory term. It's like, it's a banana republic with people who have Kalashnikovs. It's just how the media, serve as a mouthpiece for the State Department. Like, oh, you won't work with us and you won't allow American troops in your country or American companies and American banks to take over your market? Okay, we'll just call you a junta and smear you and paint you as savages and violent people. Yeah, that's how they do. So, in any case, this mine, Imuraren, all right, in the north of the country, it's one of the largest uranium deposits in the world. It's got reserves of 200,000 tons. Mining activities were supposed to start in 2015, but production was halted after the crash in uranium prices following Fukushima. Now, this is very funny because you see how the French are basically controlling uranium mining in the country for the government, right? So Niger had no autonomy on mining operations. All of the decision making was handed over to these companies. And what's great is they would classify the contract. So, if you wanted to look at how much uranium was being exported for, what price they were actually giving people in Niger in exchange for this valuable resource, well, classified, confidential, of course, because, it's robbery, it's highway robbery. So one of the reasons they used to revoke the license is that they didn't do anything. They didn't meet their expectations at the plant. And as a result, it has, quote, been returned to the public domain and exempted from all contractual rights. Orano, which has been operating in Niger for over 50 years, said it has always followed a responsible approach of partnership and transparency, blah, 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 words that don't mean anything. Yeah, just say, we're sorry for robbing you and we'll pay you back. By the way, Niger are asking for reparations for all this theft. Yeah, it adds up quite a bit. Yeah. So the company said it's willing to keep all channels of communication open. Yeah, I'm sure it is. Basically, please take us back. So look, man, I'm so proud of them. I'm really proud because this is what independence and autonomy looks like. And they just don't like it in the West. They just hate it so much. And you see it in every single article they write. Look at this from France 24, for example, where they talk about the formation of this bloc, all right? Because the one I just showed you, the speech here, okay? So this one was at the formation of the alliance, okay? And they held this in a giant stadium. And I just want to read to you a bit of these quotes that they listed here. So President Colonel Goita said that by allowing the free circulation of people and goods within the three-country bloc, the confederation that they were putting in place would one day give way to a full-fledged federation, uniting 72 million people into one community. We're moving beyond individual national identities. Instead of citizens of Mali, Burkina Faso, or Niger, we'll refer to ourselves as people of the AES. In this alliance, Burkinabe or Nigerian will feel at home in Mali and vice versa without encountering administrative barriers. See, that is what the West hates so much. Remember, all these borders that you see in Africa and the Middle East were drawn by Europeans. They're made up. They're just squiggles on a piece of paper. They don't exist in real life. They are made up by the West to, pigeonhole and label and categorize colonies. Places you steal from, right? So the best thing to do to fight neo-colonialism and reject the effects of colonialism is to do exactly this. You reverse the borders. This is something Arabs have yet to do. Syria, for example, they carved Syria up into Lebanon, Israel, Palestine, Jordan, a chunk in Iraq, a chunk in Turkey. This is ridiculous. Syria used to stretch to Gaza, and then you have Egypt. That's how it naturally was, right? And people did not... obviously you had these regions of Palestine and Lebanon in there, but they weren't, people did not regard themselves as separate nations. That's a Western concept. Barely 100 years old, all these Sykes-Picot and Balfour declarations. So again, they did the same thing in Africa, and this is the best thing to do. It's so good. It's taking back, their sovereignty by kicking out foreign troops, taking back control of the resources, and taking back control of their identity. I love it. I love it. This is what you have to do. It's so smart. It's so good. The joint communique issued by this summit says that upon this imminent union, the three countries would pool their resources to build wide-reaching transport and communications infrastructure to facilitate trade and free movement of goods and people, to support an industrial transformation, and to invest in the three nations' agriculture, mines, and energy sectors. So again, I think in this case, they're going to get the Chinese to help them, which is great because, Chinese have been going around the world building they have the best technology. They are the best at building infrastructure. And you see a pivot in these three countries, or I should say in the AES, right? You see a pivot to Russia and to China and to Turkey and to Iran. And why not? Why not? This is another form of control. It's like you want to be allies with China? What are you, a communist? You want to be an ally with Russia? Like, you can't choose. You can't choose who your allies are and your friends are. Do what we tell you. That your choice is not safe. So we're having none of this, right? And they're having none of this. And they talk about their resources. I mean, you don't understand how much robbery has been going on in Africa. It's unbelievable. I don't think you could ever calculate the amount of wealth that has been stolen. It's so much. It's so much. It's still ongoing too. All right. So it's beautiful because all these countries, or I should say this country now, right? L'AES, they have all that they need in order to prosper. They have all of it. And what they're doing by getting the Chinese to build infrastructure and the Russians to, send in Wagner and all these things, I think the idea behind getting Russians to help is that the Russians are actually interested in finishing the goal. We know from history, we know from experience that when the United States comes to fight jihadists, usually it created those jihadists in the first place, either on purpose or inadvertently. Same thing in the end for the people who live there, and it's going to use that as an excuse to occupy your land forever. It's like they give you an illness and then pretend they're there to treat you. That's the definition of American military aid. So, at least, the Russians are serious about finishing the job. They're not interested in building bases in your country because they don't do that. They just don't. And, they don't have, I think they have respect towards other countries, which Americans don't. The Americans think they can walk all over the Africans, and the French especially. Right, and that's evidenced by the fact that the ambassador refused to leave. If a diplomat, that's a diplomat, refuses an order to leave the country and disrespects the foreign ministry by refusing to show up to the foreign ministry in a country where he is a guest, then what do you think the military and the intelligence agencies are doing? You think they are going to have more respect? I mean, their behavior is scum. American and French diplomats behave like scum. Not all of them, but I mean, this was really... What this French ambassador did in Niger, he put the whole French diplomatic corps in the toilet with that behavior. And they all know it. They all know it. Yeah, I mean, you running inside the embassy and hiding with your family. I mean, what is... No one is hunting you. Just leave. No one is hunting you. You have to leave. That's all. Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable. Really unbelievable. And in the end, he left. So, it's so imperialist, their thinking. And this is over, this kind of thinking. It's done. And so going back to my point about respecting the country that you're a guest in, the Russians don't behave like that. You understand? They're not going to come in and put troops and, dig their heels in and start, puffing their chests like the Americans and the French. It's a different relationship. They understand very well what attitude people have in the AES and what they're sick of, and they're there to do the opposite. Besides, if they don't like it, they can kick them out, just like if they kicked out the Americans and the Germans and the French, right? So this is in any case, for putting all the military stuff aside, I think this is what the whole world should be doing. The whole global South needs to be looking at this model. Really, this Pan-Africanism. That's what this is. That's what this is. The problem with ECOWAS is that it's controlled by the French and by the West. That's the problem. It's compromised. So that's how they get Africans to fight Africans. That's how they get Saudi Arabia to, turn a blind eye while Palestinians are being killed and normalize ties with Israel. This is the divide and conquer. Yeah. But it can be dismantled, and you're seeing that here. Beautiful. Really beautiful. Well done to them. Well done. So, it's good to have some good news once in a while, and I'm really happy with what they're doing. The president of Senegal also, I saw him recently with the leaders of the AES, and Sonko, he was elected, and that blindsided the French, because he and his right-hand man, the prime minister, they're really, I wouldn't say anti-French, because none of these leaders are anti-French. They're just they're pro-African. You understand? Which for the French, they perceive that as being anti-French. It's not. But they're very direct. They're very fearless, and they're not afraid to tell imperialist powers to just go and screw themselves. Now, Senegal has a bit of a softer approach than them, and they didn't have as many military issues and threats. So it's a different situation, but still, the colonial aftertaste, the lingering effects of colonialism, they're all there. I think you're going to see more and more African countries pivoting like this, and it's great. They should be doing that, and they are doing that. And some of them are going to do it through elections, and some won't. But that's the end result. It's a natural progression, to shed the skin of colonialism. Well done to them. Let me show you. This is here. So I don't think Sonko was with Diomaye Faye. So Diomaye Faye is the president of Senegal. I don't think he accompanied him here, but nevertheless, this was his first visit to Mali and Burkina Faso, or I should say AES. Take a look.
Station. A farmer from Timbuktu and a jeweler from Ouagadougou wait for their names to be called out. Ahead, a treacherous journey, 2 to 7 days on a bus traveling across the war-torn Sahel toward home. And yet, despite the threat of attacks from ISIL and Al-Qaeda fighters, the young farmer is more worried about the changing climate. In his bag, precious rice seeds resistant to droughts. People are going hungry, he warns.
I plant millet and rice. In Senegal, there are seeds that I cannot find in Mali.
In January, the juntas in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso announced they would break away from the regional body ECOWAS after the organization imposed sanctions on them. The withdrawal
and threatened to invade, but okay.
Isn't just about trade. It will also end free movement across West Africa for their citizens.
I'm worried for my wife and children. With these three countries detaching themselves, it's not going to be good. To divide us will hurt us all. All African countries need to work together and unite.
I don't think that's being fairly represented. On the contrary, they want free movement with one another. It's ECOWAS that is closing off the borders and sanctioning them.
Senegal's new anti-establishment president, Bassirou Diomaye Faye, is visiting neighboring Mali and Burkina Faso.
There you go, anti-establishment president. What do you mean anti-establishment? You mean France is the establishment? Yes, that's a good characterization, but not anymore. Again, it's better to say pro-African, pan-African than anti-this. That's...
Faso, a move supported by regional leaders. They hope he can succeed where others have failed.
For Senegal, everything needs to be done to avoid a dismantling of the regional body ECOWAS because it's essential for security in the region and also on the economic front.
Mali is landlocked and 90% of its goods transit through Senegal. Ahead of the Muslim celebrations of Eid, the Senegalese capital is being flooded with sheep. Most come from neighboring Mali. The country is Senegal's biggest trading partner. And with the new elected government, it seems the two countries share more than economic ties. Both countries are looking for a break from their past relationship with France, the former colonial power. Early in May, Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko announced it was time to revisit the presence of a French military base in Senegal.
You see what I'm saying?
French soldiers have been present in West Africa for over 100 years. President Faye's visit is the start of a new journey for citizens across the region in search for a new direction. Nicholas Hawk, Al Jazeera, Dakar.
So you have to understand with ECOWAS, they've conditioned some African leaders to promote it as like some kind of it's a powerful regional bloc. No, it's not. It's doing the opposite of what it's supposed to do. Okay, they've sanctioned people who just want to Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, just for wanting to have a government that is not beholden to the French. And then, like I said, they threaten to invade them. And then also you have all these military attaches from the West and all these Western companies and representatives. It's like, it's like cutting a hole in a wall or punching a hole in a wall or cutting a hole through a fence and allowing all the crap, or rather the bad things about Western foreign policy to flow into Africa under the guise of regional cooperation. You understand what I'm saying? It's something that needs to be completely reformed, honestly. This is a statement from July 30th, from 2023. So the United States welcomes and commends the strong leadership of the Economic Community of West African States, that's ECOWAS. Heads of state and government to defend constitutional order in Niger, actions that respect the will of the Nigerian people and align with the enshrined ECOWAS and African Union principles of zero tolerance for unconstitutional change. We join ECOWAS and regional leaders in calling for the immediate release of President Bazoum and his family and the restoration of all state functions, blah, 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 blah. Translation, we support you invading Niger. Okay, so you can see that the United States and France use it as a cutout, essentially, to continue projecting power inside of Africa. Again, if it was legitimately Pan-African and, something that helped the continent, I'd be the first one to come here and tell you why it's good. I'm telling you that this is another Western setup, all right? And this is why they can't shed, or it's so difficult to shed French and British neocolonialism in the Middle East and in Africa, because they've disguised colonialism, not, they don't do it directly through the state, they do it through corporations and through these blocks, right? So it looks like it's a different initiative, but it's still the French state, it's still the British state, etc. In any case, man, Captain Ibrahim, he dropped so much truth, really. Again, YouTube demonetized my channel because I'm not allowed to say naughty things about Israel. Telling the truth is forbidden. So if you are able to donate a few dollars on PayPal or on a monthly basis on Patreon, please consider doing it, because it would really help me continue my journalism and support independent media. So I'd be very grateful. And the links are in the description and also in the chat. Thank you guys very much again for all your donations and all your kind comments. I appreciate it very much.